Hello, everyone. Kevin Shipp coming to you from the Ascent Studios, located somewhere deep in the southeastern United States, amongst the trees and the vines. I'm doing a series now on preparedness, um, how to become a prepper, how to live off the grid, and those subjects, which is very important considering the crisis level that the U.S. debt is reaching, and also how we're all bound by what I call a system. And an analogy some use is the matrix that has everybody under control. Now, I think that's a pretty good and interesting analogy, but we're all part of this system, a system of debt, a system being bound to the utility companies, rent and mortgage increases, and all of that. So piece by piece, I'm going to go through our off-the-grid farm, which I started when I left the CIA to become a whistleblower, and faced a pretty huge risk, and freed myself from all of that by the grace of God by going off the grid to an off-the-grid farm. And I'll be talking about those in the series as we go. So sit back and enjoy this. This is an introduction to the preparedness programs I'm doing on my Patreon channel, patreon.com/Kevin_Shipp. And I'll talk a little bit about that at the end. So let's get going. I want to look at some of this stuff because it is so important. Are preppers maniacs, conspiracy theorists? No, preppers are very intelligent people, from secretaries to engineers to doctors. Our good friend is a doctor. He's a prepper, if you want to call him that. These are people that are preparing because the economy is going to have a crisis. We don't know when. I think Donald Trump has held it back during his term. We'll see in the second term. But the amount of debt, the deficit and the U.S. debt is so high it can never be repaid. The global debt, 245 trillion, is so high it could never be paid. And eventually that is going to burst. That bubble is going to burst. So it's time and it's wise to prepare now. And so we want to go through some of the ways to do that with you all as I introduce you to the series that will be on Patreon, on my Patreon channel. So why prepare? Now, I talk to a lot of people of faith, religious people that say, you know, I'm just trusting in God. I don't need to prepare. What's going to happen is going to happen. Or others, secular folks that say, when it happens, I'll deal with it and I'll survive. Well, both of those are fallible arguments and can get you in a lot of trouble. They're not good arguments. So to cite this, in the book of Proverbs in the Bible, it says this, quote, "A prudent man perceives the evil and hides himself, but the simple pass on and are punished." Another version of this, a New American Standard Bible, "A prudent man sees evil and hides himself. The naive proceed and pay a penalty." So it is prudent for people, whether you're a person of faith or secular, it is prudent for you to prepare. Number one, to understand what is coming. And number two, learn how to prepare for it. And preparedness can be fascinating. It can be very fun. It can even be a hobby. It's a hobby for many, many people. Why did I become a prepper? I was a decorated CIA officer, a branch manager. I'd risen up to the higher ranks of the agency. And you can see here the picture. I was on our counter-assault, anti-terrorism assault team sent out against a terrorist target targeting our people. And I had a very good, solid career. So why did I come out and why did I become a prepper? I uncovered a CIA vulnerability to our agents overseas, where any sort of foreign agent could go into the embassy and then identify our cover personnel and, of course, everybody they came in contact with, which could result in their compromise or their assassination. Instead of investigating that, the CIA targeted me, destroyed my memos, removed them from the server, called and threatened me on the inside line. To make a very long story short, I went outside to a high-level investigator in the government who helped me do an investigation, and they found out it was worse than even I thought, and the CIA was rebuked for putting the lives of its agents at risk for over 10 years. Kind of felt like I had a laser dot on my back at that point. They moved me to a base into a house. My family was poisoned by a toxin there very badly. My son almost terminally, my wife almost terminally, and my other two kids very sick. I was not as sick as they were because I was out of the house most of the day up in the other building running the program. So I collected evidence on the doctor's diagnosis from the poisoning. I collected samples from inside the house and sent them to the CIA, and that's when the cover-up again began, and I was targeted for doing that. And you'll find that full story on fortheloveoffreedom.net, my website, where I've revealed all those documents to show you how the shadow government / deep state can try, in this case they tried, but failed to cover up a case of negligence and criminal activity. My house was broken into. They painted a chemical on the ceiling. Our family was followed. We were bugged. This is American citizens, and I was a managing employee at the time, but because I blew the whistle, and I did it internally starting off, and I learned that's not the way to do it. You try to do it within their system, and they'll just destroy you. But that's what happened. So I personally witnessed NSA surveillance, CIA break-ins to our home, and bugging. And I came out, of course, as many of you know, and you'll find on my website, fortheloveoffreedom.net, I came out and blew the whistle. All right. Of course, doing that was a threat to my personal safety. Of course, one of the reasons I'm off the grid now. And secondly, when I came out and blew the whistle, I lost my retirement completely. And now I've got to provide for me and my kids on my programs, my book, and coming out in public with these channels. So that is why I became a prepper personally. This is a reason not just I became a prepper or started joining in the preparedness movement, if you want to call it that, which is a bunch of great people, just wonderful people. But this is why we all should prepare. I wanted, as I'm sure everybody does, free from the debt false currency matrix. We're all in debt in some way, or at least we were, in our case, are in debt to several different debtors, and that makes us a servant to them. They can make or destroy our lives in a whim. And there's a false currency matrix. The Federal Reserve, which is neither federal nor a reserve, has been printing monopoly money, fake paper money. We no longer have a gold-backed currency system, and it is volatile. And you don't want to be a part of that. You want to have your own wealth, income that can't be touched by the coming debt crisis. Freedom from fragile utilities, electric and water, that all can go out and leave you with nothing. And also the fact that I know in Jacksonville, Florida alone, they're going to raise the price of utilities 20% on everyone. And as the population grows, and as the debt grows, and as the trade wars continue, the cost of utilities, electric, water, etc., they're going to go up even more, to the point where it's going to be ridiculous to pay your utilities. You're not going to want to go to your mailbox or at your door and open up that electric bill, not knowing, and even cable bills, internet bills, live streaming, TV bills, all those are going up. Freedom from food shortages. Food shortages can happen overnight, even as we've all seen, because of a tornado, a hurricane, and so many other natural causes that can cause the trucks to stop from bringing food to the Walmarts, for example, and within 24 hours, the shelves are empty and you're left with nothing. So you're free from that because you're now self-sustained. And self-sustaining preparedness simply is just freedom. Your freedom from bad food and water. A lot of the food is contaminated, although it's approved for consumption. Drinking water in the United States is chlorinated, of course. It has fluoride in it. Studies are coming out that fluoride is not good for kids, although the fluoride industry and the water industry is trying to silence those people. Also in the water that people are drinking are antibiotics that people have flushed into the system and other things. So, it's better than other countries, and thank God for that, but it's not pure water. Freedom to eat healthy food and water and prevent disease. We grow our own food. We grow our own organic food. We've built a greenhouse so that our food is pesticide-free and also healthy to eat. We eat largely raw vegetables and fish and eggs, and occasionally we'll have a steak. We just don't eat very much red meat for pretty obvious reasons. So you control what you eat, not someone else, and you never run out of food. And we'll show you as we go along food storage and other things that you can do. And also, of course, if you're on an off-the-grid farm or off-the-grid property, if you homeschool your kids, especially, and that's a great movement. I'm not saying you have to homeschool your kids, but my son-in-law is homeschooling their daughter, and it's worked out just wonderfully. I mean, the advances that she's made, because you have a teacher with just 2 students instead of a teacher with 40 students that are acting up, I think you get a better education. So very good reasons to go off the grid and become a prepper, quote unquote. Back to constitutional government. The preparedness movement is based on the Constitution. We are sadly living under a post-constitutional government now. It is doing illegal, unconstitutional, and sometimes criminal things that are in direct violation, especially to the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, and the Second Amendment. First and Fourth Amendments being grossly violated. So you have your own little constitutional space, meaning you're the good guys, you're the white hats, you're the legal people. Remember that the U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of the land. It supersedes the entire criminal justice system, and it supersedes any regulation or law that Congress or the government could try to pass. So the Constitution is the law of our land, and by being a constitutionalist, you are being a legal citizen, sometimes better than the actual government itself. I'm not anti-government, as I mentioned earlier, but I am anti-unconstitutional government. You can bet on it. And if you look at all my speeches on the web, you certainly get that pretty clear. So we're all under surveillance now, of course, by what I call the shadow government, the intelligence agencies, or the deep state, the swamp in Washington. We're under surveillance. Our personal privacy is gone. It's a thing of the past in America. We are all, whether we want to believe it or not, or like it or not, we are all now under surveillance by our own government and by social media and by corporations that try to sell us products. Also, we want to be free, completely free from the central banks and the control of the Federal Reserve. They can change our economy on a whim. They can send us in a downspin on a whim. And if the central banks fail, and that's where all the money has gone now after the bailouts, if the central banks fail, there's no one to bail them out. Basically, it's over. So there is a financial crisis coming. The U.S. debt now it's 22 trillion. It is projected that by 2025, the U.S. debt will be $30 trillion. At that point, impossible to ever pay off. And it will be impossible, very close to impossible, to even pay off the interest on that loan yearly. So it's out of control, and that bubble is going to burst. There's no question about it. The global debt amongst global nations is 245 trillion. Look in Google and see how much $1 trillion is. It's mind-boggling. The global debt is $245 trillion. That's going to be a global debt burst. When this happens, it is going to be ugly. And I recommend that you start thinking about freeing yourself from this system now, bit by bit, and start separating yourself from this system. So when it does come down, you and your family are not in a horrible crisis. Deutsche Bank, if you have been reading the news lately, is failing. It looks like Deutsche Bank is going to go bankrupt itself, and Deutsche Bank has lost $75 trillion in derivatives. What are derivatives? Derivatives are not money. They're numbers. They're numbers in the stock market that have floated around that have no gold backing, no money backing. They're basically air money or digital money that is traded based on being linked to paper money down the road. But derivatives right now are just digits, bits and bytes. That's it. And it's run by AI. It's run by computers. If the derivatives market goes up in smoke, and that's very possible because there's nothing backing it up except air. You got a real problem. The Deutsche Bank, one of the largest central banks in the world, is now failing, and they've lost 75 trillion in derivatives. So if the derivatives start to fail, there's a real problem. And we can see here from the Deutsche Bank that they have already started to fail. I mentioned what derivatives are. A huge part of the stock market is made up of derivatives. The Federal Reserve began in 1913 behind the back of the American people, is controlling our economy. The Federal Reserve has no gold backing, and it's printing fake monopoly money to keep up with the U.S. debt. The Federal Reserve also does its operations in secret. Its board of directors are secret. The banks that are part of the Federal Reserve are secret, and they are foreign banks. These are not American banks. These are foreign banks in control of our economy. All the Fed has to do is raise or lower our interest rates, and they control everything we do, the cars we buy, our mortgage rates, credit card rates, anything that is tied to interest rates goes up, and we can be destroyed overnight financially. The U.S. has abandoned the gold-based currency, very stupid thing to do, very ignorant thing for FDR to do, because yeah, it made them and the elite happy back then, but it put us now in a severe financial crisis in this country because we have no gold to back our currency. Russia and China, however, are buying billions of dollars of gold right now to increase their gold supplies because they know it's coming. Are we doing that? No, we're not. How silly, how foolish can we be? China and Russia have now and are joining together to abandon the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency and make it the yuan and the ruble, the Chinese yuan and the Russian ruble. They want to get rid of the U.S. dollar. They see what's coming. They're starting to do that right now, replace U.S. dollars with yuans and rubles. If that happens, if the U.S. dollar is no longer the world reserve currency, then our dollar is going to plummet in value, and it's going to cause a crisis in the United States. That crisis is already being planned by China and Russia, who are looking out for their own interests, of course, instead of ours, and they don't want to be controlled or linked to the U.S. That's happening now. You don't hear much about it, but if you go to financial analysts, you go to papers, internet news like Zero Hedge, and read that. And I'd recommend Zero Hedge that you read that regularly. You'll find what the financial analysts are saying. The bubble's going to burst. Economic collapse will happen. We just don't know when. The central banks are going to collapse. When a central bank collapses, guess what? They're going to freeze all of your assets. You're not going to be able to get to your own money. And that's what happens when a bank collapses. So be thinking about money that you have in the central banks, and be thinking about how, where, and when you're going to invest in the stock market and how long you're going to stay in. And I do a lot of study on that. Over and above all of this, I would be financially free yourself by being a prepper off the grid, providing your own food, solar power, providing your own electricity and utilities, and separate yourself from this system, because when it comes down, it's going to be horrible. The financial elite have created this system through the Federal Reserve. The financial elite have created a system that benefited them, have made them multi-billionaires, but they set up a system that's going to fail and destroy the little guy. There's a special place in hell for those people. I think they're riding a greased bobsled to hell for what they've done to so many people and the suffering that they're going to cause. Just in time, it's called JIT Living Supplies in U.S. stores. Our system is set up to supply the stores daily, at most weekly. The trucks roll in, they stock the shelves are emptied by people. The next week, another truck rolls in. So there is no backup supply in any of our retail stores. I don't know if people know that, but they run out until the trucks roll in and restock their shelves. There is no backup storage in any of these retail institutions. So if the economy collapses, gas goes through the roof and the truckers can't come, the shelves remain empty, and there's no right way to restock them. When you are off the grid, you are free from the just-in-time system. And when that happens to a bunch of people, it's not going to happen to you. And you can count on the fact when the crisis happens, the government will protect itself through continuity of government. That program, the government will protect itself and its leaders over the American people, who will be left to fend for themselves. There will be chaos in the cities. It'll be horrible. There will be desperate people. There will be people that are normal, good people, but when their kids haven't eaten for a week or two, they get desperate. And the ones that have no strong moral centering will become essentially animals. And they'll break into the neighbors' houses. They'll steal things. They'll steal money. They'll steal property to try to feed their families. That's not counting the crooks and the criminals that are already out there that are going to loot in the streets, break into people's houses like happened in South Africa, and kill the occupants. That's how bad it's going to be. If you're off the grid, obviously, you're safe from that. So, deep in the woods, as I mentioned, in the southeastern United States, is our off-the-grid farm. And on the show on patreon.com, I go into specifically each part of this farm and how I built it so people can avoid the mistakes I made when my wife and we made when we built this thing, and help people learn to prepare. This, don't get discouraged. This is what our piece of property looked like when we started building. Clearing the property, we were both working. I was teaching at a university, and my wife Sue was an IT program manager, and we traveled to this property on weekends and just worked. At that point, it was kind of a hobby. But this is what it looked like, and I had to clear this land before we even started putting our off-the-grid home and solar system and everything up. So don't get discouraged. You just start one piece at a time. This is the composting toilet. I've done a show on this on Patreon, how I built this, how it functions. This is completely self-sustaining. The doo-doo goes down and is covered with peat moss and turns into soil, which we use to fertilize our plants. We do not use it on our garden. There are a whole lot of things in human poop you don't want going on your vegetables and wind up eating. You do not use human compost on vegetables. We just use it very well on our plants out in our yard that we don't eat. This is what it looks like. And I go into detail on Patreon exactly how I built this thing and how it functions. So, and this is very important for everyone, from the people who live in an apartment to those of you who have a couple acres or more of land. How do you eat an elephant? How do you become a prepper? How do you move off the grid? It's like eating an elephant. As I said, one bite at a time. We started just with a generator and a chainsaw. And it took me a while. I used that chainsaw quite a bit to clear the land, and the generator I used for the source of power to power the tools I used as I built everything. So one bite at a time. That's how you do it. And we made it a hobby, and it's something that's become our love, really. Another thing, very famous quote by Edmund Burke: all that is necessary for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing. So we have to do something. We're looking at an international global financial crisis. We're looking at a severe cultural crisis in the United States, almost a cultural civil war that is happening right now. So we need to act, all of us, in one fashion or another, starting small and getting big. We're going to have to do something for our sake and the sake of our families. So I hope that helped you all. If you would like to see the full shows that I do on living off the grid, I've done building a composting toilet. I've done backup power and generators. I've done building a chicken coop. We're going to go into solar, growing a vegetable garden, soil, and on and on and on. You can find those programs on patreon.com/Kevin_Shipp. I also have up-to-date news programs on that channel called The Intelligence Briefing every Thursday at 7 p.m., where I keep everybody updated. Basically, it's a government watchdog channel, and it's a channel that deals with things that have been hidden from the American people in some cases that have happened recently. I expose the shadow government and its control over Congress and mechanisms of the deep state, and I do it with facts and with evidence on the intelligence assessment. I also have training courses on surveillance detection and how to spot a liar, detection of deception on this channel, patreon.com/Kevin Kevin_Shipp. Welcome you to come and join our community there. You can find out my story and see my credentials on my website, fortheloveoffreedom.net. I have also daily briefings on there of things that people need to know. Every single day I put another, it's called the Shipp Brief. Every day I put another piece of news up there that people can check out. There's a lot of documents the CIA tried to conceal that I put on there about the poisoning of my family, doctors' diagnoses, environmental reports, and other things. And you can see the full and entirety of my case and what the shadow government tried to do, not just to me, but to my family, and why I came out and became a whistleblower. On my Twitter account, Twitter at Kevin_Shipp, I give daily updates on the shadow government and deep state, the culture war, and a lot of things that are happening in the U.S. And I do that daily, sometimes several times a day, depending on the news that's coming in. And of course, you can find me on Facebook /KevinShipp. I put the same updates on my Facebook page for those of you who don't use Twitter. And if you need to contact me, you can reach me at For Love of Freedom. It's not For the Love of Freedom. It is For Love of Freedom @gmail.com. That is my official Gmail address. And if you have questions, concerns, or something you want to report, you can send it to that Gmail. So there we have it. I want to thank you all very much for tuning in. And I hope some of you go to Patreon and join our family, our community there. I think you'll enjoy some of the content we put there. So Kevin Shipp saying we'll see you next time until we have the next program. Thanks you all. Thanks for tuning in.